question is, do you want this board?
Yeah, if we do, we may want to angle it just a little bit. Oh.
Elliot this morning said.
I mean, that's not going to be great for them to.
No, it's not. I'm just looking to see. I think it's good enough. I think the majority of the people will probably be here. Don't you think?
Yeah, and this table is. Yeah, I think it'll be okay.
Are we going to record it also?
Should I?
Okay, good.
But it's not just like chugging on right now. Like the liquid version of the can how much you can consume.
Hello, my name is Justin.
Hi, Justin.
Check 1, 2. Check. 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 No one seconds.
I do questions. I I'm saving you guys.
Thank you.
That's what I'm getting myself to. But I thought 15 is going to be here. Yes, it is. Because I
How much comes over with you?
So, that's the microphone.
This is the mic here.
So obviously,
This.
Yes, I need to get a new phone as well. I'm using my wife's phone.
I wanted to get one last month because I had where and I had the Wi-Fi. And I said, well, you don't yeah. And so then for $29, I can get my crack fix. So now I can get my
Check.
check. This is what it sounds like when somebody talks up front.
Well, it's an upgrade for her, so yeah. I'm trying to convince my dad to accept my mom's letter. She gets it right. He's resisting me. It's really terrible, but it's because they're all buttons in it. So when I was it's not an Apple phone, it's an Android.
So I was an Android user until like 6 months ago, and then when Eliana, my 16, she got her first smartphone, and she got an iPhone, and then it's like I'm the only one in the family that doesn't have an iPhone, so I can't participate in iOS.
So it should, like when somebody talks in here, it should just barely be turning red
Right now we have 5
under
spaces.
normal talk.
So now.
testing. I'm looking for red light, right? No. Testing. Let me go red. You should go red. Only has 3 quarters. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We do have we have a mic right here, so as we speak, I guess kind of pointing this way for those. We are going to record it, and then if anyone is able to, they can watch it from YouTube at home. So I certainly appreciate this one. Okay. I appreciate you guys giving up your time, and I know that this is bringing in an external consultant is also spending some of our school resources, so we take this very seriously. We think the topic is important enough to kind of hold in a special meeting, which is why we're doing this here tonight. We had the alternative that we discussed some of the formats of spending like a Friday or a Saturday together, and we thought maybe we could break it up into some smaller chunks. And then we also got some feedback to see if we can incorporate some more of these future sessions into our workshops, which we will do as able, so you're not asking for extra time. But we do have a requirement every few years to revisit our kind of strategic plan as our authorizer asks us to do, so we'll do that. And we're taking an opportunity also to go through a couple other things. One is now that we have a fantastic new administrative team, how do we make sure that we are governing ourselves together with administration, and how do we make sure that that's clear? And then we also have just the normal kind of, I think our role as the board, if you will, is to kind of make sure that we're aiming the school in the right direction, right? So we're just going to go through and say, what's our mission, vision, what's our values, these sorts of things. So we'll go over that and just say, this house still sound about right, and then tweaks or changes needed. So I don't want to take any more of your time because I think that's why we're here. But anyways, and masks, if you can, if we are in indoor space, unless you're speaking, but we'll leave it up to you guys. We're not technically out of school. Okay? Thank you. Any questions? Otherwise, Mr. Bruce is going to handle the rest.
Cecilia, opening comments, anything you'd like to say and contribute to getting us started?
No, I think Dan covered it. Thank you, Bruce.
Very good, okay. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for taking, the majority of you were able to find some time to take a phone call as board members, and it was helpful for me to understand where you were as board members and where you believe the school is. This is pretty cool. I'm coming to you as a former school paraprofessional, and then I taught regular ed and special ed and became an administrator. And in 1994, I was the only person St. Cloud State could find that had superintendent, principal, and special ed director licensure. So I taught at St. Cloud State for 6 years for teachers going back to be principals, executive directors, business managers, soups. And then I went on my own full-time in 99. So you're using some tools tonight that I developed to help people figure out how to do strategic planning easier. I've been a victim of some pretty poor strategic planning in multiple districts. And in one session, we had 40 administrators sitting around a table, and we sat in threes. So we had the elected person from our triad, and we would stand behind him or her. And then they worked for 4 hours on a vision statement. And they were to the point where there was concerns about semicolons versus colons. So we burned 160 leadership hours and about $6,000 for 4 hours, and then never saw the product again. So that's pretty painful, and I don't think people need to go through that. You're setting the stage for planning within the school, and the work that you do as a leadership group, board and leaders together, will help everybody start to fill it in. In a perfect world, the board, well, have you all heard of Oprah Winfrey? Relatively successful businesswoman. She brings her tech team together, and she draws a square on a whiteboard and says, tech team, I would insult you if I told you how to build a website, but I'd like to give you some guidance. So she says, up here she writes appearance, and then she goes, I would like it to sort of look like this. And then she writes features down one side and says, here are the features that I think we should be able to deliver to our customers. She says, experience, here's what I want people to feel like when they deal with us. And then she writes timeline and says, and I'd like it done in 30 days. Do you have any questions? And they ask questions about that, but they understand their job is to go back and color within the lines. What you're going to be doing this evening is starting to build some of those lines for where the plan goes for the school. You will provide some direction in the beginning. People will bring you their best thoughts, and their work is advisory, not binding. And then the board, later on in the project, will sew it up all together by looking at all the data and making the best decisions you can. If I could take you to the thicker packet of the two this evening, and you would go inside to the outcome diagnosis worksheet. We're going to put you to work in small groups pretty quickly. Who here is holding a jack? Would you raise your hand and find your partners? Jacks right there. Okay, how about queens? Okay, and kings? Great, and aces? All right, you have only two in the ace group. Here's what we'd like you to do. When you get into small groups, we're going to give you about 20 minutes to do the work. It is an ungraded exercise. It's a pass-fail only. But I want you to think back about the school for as long as you've been here. And in the top left corner, tell us what the school has tried to do that's paying off. So tell us about activities that were intended that have had a positive outcome. And you could tell us about singles or doubles or triples or home runs. But the top left is something you're spending time or energy or money on, and you're getting some product, some return on investment. Top right, this is where you identify things that you've tried to do that haven't paid off as well or haven't paid off yet. It's nobody's fault, nobody's going under the bus, but top left is we tried it, it's paying off. Top right is we tried it, we have yet to get everything we want out of it. One item can go in more than one box too. Lower left, these are things that are going better than anticipated. So they're unintended, but they're still real positive. Bottom right, this is where we put COVID, for example. It's unintended and had a tough effect on everybody. So we want you to think about the whole complexity of the school, from everything from operations to instruction to student outcomes to family engagement to finances. We've got about 20 minutes. When you've done, we're going to hear back from each group and sort of hear where you are. This is the last time we'll look backwards, but this is you sort of saying, here's how we got to this evening. Any questions about this incredibly complex worksheet?
When you say intended and unintended, by who?
Unintended and unintended by the school or the board or administration or staff. Other questions? Have at it. Stay caffeinated if you can. Stay hydrated if nothing else.
Who else was Queens? Were you a Queen? And Jeff's a Queen. All right.
We can go on one table, we can do that.
So you just stay here? Sure. Hey, Jeff. Oh, you're going to mute it? Good call.
left corner. One group, what do you have in the top left corner?
Top high school in Minnesota. Top high school in Minnesota.
Top high school, Minnesota. Another group, what else do you have in the top left? And if you'll remove your mask when you're speaking, just for that moment, it'll go just a little bit.
We have small class sizes.
Small class size, and I think that was on virtually every sheet here. Top left, what else do you have?
But maintain rigor.
Yes, rigor was also a repeated element on these. Keep going, top left. Don't be shy.
Diverse staff.
Increase the diversity of staff.
Yep,
I would not say
good.
diverse staff, but increase the diversity of staff.
Great. Top left,
The location of the school.
physical location. Don't be shy, everybody.
Student success is lifelong and global.
Student success is lifelong and global.
We have maintained some of the standardized data benchmarks like ACT, AP, XCAs.
Okay, so some of your standardized data looks real good. Great news. One good measure. Top left. Overachievers, what do you have in yours?
We also have great extracurricular activities.
Very good. Thanks. What else do you have in that top left that's not been said?
We have expectations.
Expectations.
High expectations, yeah.
Good. So top left going once. Any other additions?
I don't, we didn't mention it earlier, but the diversity of our student body.
Diversity of student body. Very good.
But is that intended? That's unintended.
Yeah, I think that would be on.
Yeah, we didn't know.
Yeah, you're right.
We will, it may end at both places. Top left going twice. Anything else that was said in your group that you want for the record?
We weren't sure if it was going to be an intended positive or unintended positive, but as part of virtual learning, there was some pretty active life skills coaching that happened, like talking about how to keep your schedule, how
Cool.
to maintain.
Good outcome.
So that
Good. Let's shift to the top right. Despite everybody's best work, there are some things that aren't as far along as you want them to be. What do you have in the top right quadrant?
Building capacities.
Building capacity. You're not complaining here, you're just stating some facts. Top right, what else do you have?
We had two different things for COVID responses. One was our Tutor.com usage, and one was just someone did respond to all the distance learning.
One more time. The first one was
Tutor.com.
Tutor.com, and the second one was
Some responses to distance learning.
some responses to distance learning. Okay, thanks. Top right, what else did you have?
Differential grading in order to pass the same course.
Got it. Differential grading in order to pass the same course. Thanks.
Coaching was lacking, and you're talking maybe coaching of our administrative staff, and then also you can maybe say coaching for the admins and teachers. But anyways, there's something lacking there. We had some turnover higher than we would like.
Yeah, understood. Top right.
The way we communicate or don't. The way we communicate or don't communicate, and it's intentional, it's not positive.
Yeah, and people have slivers of other slivers of that in these other sheets too. Top right, what hasn't been said?
A lot of homework.
A lot of homework. Wait, for staff or for?
Oh, okay, that's homework, staff, not shift grading.
What else do you have at the top right? Not everybody has to agree on this. We want to get it all out on the table so people are thinking about it before we start to move on.
building capacities.
Building capacity.
We have filling duties due to staff shortage. Filling duties due to staff shortages. Or, yeah.
Filling duties due to employee and staff shortages. And by the way, as we're working through this, if things come to mind that aren't written down, if they're still worthwhile to bring up. So if there are some other things that you think still need work, or need to be abandoned, or need to be looked at a lot closer than they are, it'd be nice to hear about them now. Are there any other things that are speed bumps or irregularities or something that's going to need more board administration time?
So we talked about the complaint/letter the staff person sent to the paper, and then some things that led to the investigation, and a whole bunch of things happened from that. We don't know where it belongs. We don't know where some of that belongs.
It could certainly be in
Big
2 or 3 of
thing,
those.
yeah.
Sure, yeah. Okay.
I would say for ours, and again, I think it would be under intentional, but just a lack of clear procedures and follow-through consistency. So procedures for everyday organization.
Lack of clear procedures for everyday
and
operation.
lack of consistent follow-through.
And lack of consistent follow-through. Good, thank you. Other thoughts? Top right. Going once? Going twice? Let us go down to the lower left. Where might things be going a little better than you would have anticipated?
Students are kind.
Students are kind. Excellent. Great outcome.
We talked about how the unintended space constraints have made MSA a place that people want to go. Like low supply makes high demand.
How about that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Lower left.
We had a strong connection between students.
Strong connection between students. Great.
We had the technology requirement for both teachers and students, right? When we moved to COVID, both teachers and students probably leveled up in terms of their familiarity with technology.
Their ability to use it and make it happen. Good. And important, and you guys had a number of ones that did that.
So you said earlier how online platforms kind of use it.
Okay.
We had both positive unintended and less than positive unintended staff through. So it's good.
So we'll put staff in on the bottom left, and we'll probably put over there in the bottom right too. Okay. Anything else from the bottom left quadrant that you wanted to record here?
We did discover that some students and some teachers thrive in the online environment.
Well, some students and some teachers thrive in the online environment. Good.
I would also say that the ones that didn't thrive learned that they wouldn't. And I think that's an important thing that like when they're looking for college is
Yeah.
you know, so even if the experience was negative, if they learned something from it.
A big new experience for them. I mean, there is something they can take away from it.
Yeah.
I will say, I think an unintended but positive is our student body. Really, they already self-advocated for themselves. Now they self-advocate for each other.
So the student body who was good at self-advocating for individuals themselves,
Yep.
they're better now at advocating for the entire student body.
Yes.
Very cool outcome, right? Certainly unanticipated. Let's go to the bottom right. No one's fault here. Stuff's unpredictable, but what are the big rocks that are unanticipated and pretty hard to move? COVID.
Money.
Money and funding, yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Meaning that there's areas where we need money and we didn't realize that in our budgeting. Like you have no way of knowing how that was going to work out in virtual learning. So there were things that were funded and now are not. We didn't know if they were going to be or not, now we can't do those.
So kind of an outcome of COVID and the money that was lost.
Last year budgeting was
Yeah, it was,
it
and that continues.
was just
to be
throwing
so.
darts at a dartboard almost.
Yeah, so.
So the budgeting process also.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely, and not knowing, because we learned so late, when there was gonna be funds for things, we didn't, suddenly an infusion of cash didn't help because you didn't know ahead of time enough to plan what you wanted to use it, so it just became chaotic.
Got it. Bottom right?
Yeah, I didn't understand that student voices were not heard.
Student voices were not heard. Okay, didn't listen, understand, and agree with some of that feedback. Jeff, what are you thinking?
Oh, and this is both intended and unintended, but just management decision-making issues.
Got it?
There was inconsistent instructional leadership.
Inconsistent instructional leadership.
Right, in terms of coaching staff and, identifying issues and addressing them before they became too far.
Just so you pick that one up. Very good, thanks. Go ahead.
Our lack of a hot lunch program might limit families from even considering our school.
Very good, good observation. Anything that you would like anywhere else on the grid, now that you've really heard some other people's thinking and you're kind of getting over your hypoglycemia from dinner, any other thoughts about the good news, the bad news, anticipated, unanticipated?
So we have one that could be, it's unintended, but it could be positive or less than positive. A lot of staff and student turnover from last year to this year because of COVID. So lots of new students, lots of new staff. It's good, but it's a challenge.
Did you guys put in new director in the lower left in this room?
Yeah, we got it in the upper.
Okay, very good. Self-advocacy is a very good thing. All right. Other thoughts? What else needs to be on this?
Well, communication, have we put that in any box? Because sometimes, I don't know where to put it, because if it's unintended, the communication is an issue.
I think that came up with a couple, so it's a little more problematic than we'd like it to be. I mean, it's hard work anyway, but you got a number of other speed bumps that are prevented or hindered. Other thoughts, what else should be in there?
Another unintended positive is participation in sports at all levels, all grades.
Better than anticipated. Great. Great, that says a lot.
So something that is, I'm not sure where it goes, but in addition to the complete turnover of administration, there was also a complete turnover of the special ed team.
Okay. All right, are we in closure on this? Or are there any other additions you would like to make? Sounds like we're about there. If you're dying to go back to where you're originally sitting, feel free to do it. We're going to work through just a very few discussion pieces about boards and board work. So let's take a minute and find out where you want to be, and we'll start back in. See, I'll grab that. Yeah, thanks.
I didn't think so.
Believe me, I can't see the same time. This is the wrong time to try to read it. Thank you. This portion of the work package that you have there is meant to start a discussion. This is not in response to problems. When I visited with board chair and a couple of other board members earlier in the summer, I believe it was in July, they had talked about the board inadvertently sliding into some micromanagement. And I gave the Pequot Lakes story. The Pequot Lakes board, about 12 or 13 years ago, made a pretty tough decision on the superintendent. They had somebody in there who wasn't getting a lot done, and so one person showed up and was relatively bombastic and full of energy and probably way more full of ego than they needed. And so they said, this person will really make it work for us. Well, within about 3 years, he was telling the board how to do their job and what they ought to be doing and where they're going wrong. Interesting concept, but that's typically like greasing the slide on the way out. So the board had to launch this cat in December, and they ran the district for 6 months. The other administrators were not very strong individuals, and they also decided to keep their head down because they figured if the board could launch that person, that they could be next. So the board jumped into the vacuum and literally managed everything. And there was one cat that had been waiting for that his whole life. And so he was way down in the weeds. I mean, way down in the weeds. And the good news is the board got through it. The board made a spectacular selection, and the person filled 3 contracts for 9 years for them. And they got out of it, but they really had to do what you've already done, it sounds like, because as I dealt with other board members in phone calls, I heard that the micromanagement had been an issue, but it seems to be getting more distant. The Moorhead board has a phrase they use. Whenever a board member starts getting a little too far down, they go, pull up. And that means the plane is headed for the ground. And they all giggle, and he or she goes, yeah, okay, maybe I'm a little too far into it. And they all go, well, it's easy to do. And they say, we should hand it off to our superintendent because, you know, she's exceptional and she'll do the job for us. But it's their own kind of common language. You have a piece on page 3 in this same packet that speaks generically about board assets and what boards are really supposed to do. What I'd like to ask you to do now is tell us who in the room here does one of these really well. Who here makes sure that we ensure adequate resources? Who here is the person most likely to help enhance the school's public image? Could you hand some compliments across the table or across the room to somebody? I realize you've got some new faces here. But for some of you more senior members, who's done this well or who's advocated for some of these items really effectively? Say, Eric, I was just thinking you might want to tell us your thoughts on this.
Well, I'm one of the newbies.
Okay. And boards don't all need, these are all on continuums, right? So determining mission and purpose, it could be all the way from, we've never done it, we're not going to go anywhere near it, to we've done it and kicked butt and taken names. So these are not just on-off, they're not binary, they're really in a continuum. So in terms of the ones that you're good at, Dan, who's done it well?
Michelle does really well at this. I'm going to put it under moderate organizations, programs, and services, but in particular, she's always on with policies and whatnot, right? So she can come back and say, this is our policy, and I always can trust Michelle's got it under control, so I kind of relieve a little bit my own, headspace for that. I appreciate her help with that.
Yeah, good, good.
I think Dan and Cecilia did an excellent job. Dan and Cecilia did an excellent job with the organization's public image.
Great, great.
And I'll say, I feel really supported by the whole board, and especially Dan and Maggie, who I meet with on a regular basis. And Bruce, I should say, we're missing our vice chairman tonight.
Yes.
So, and then I know you will be reviewing my performance. So.
I would say that I appreciate that in terms of managing resources effectively, I appreciate Cody's experience.
We don't want you hiding compliments behind the mask, all right?
I appreciate Cody's experience and how he really takes a critical eye to not just the budget itself, but its process.
Cool.
Definitely.
Great.
I'm gonna add that Sandy's also on the finance committee, so we get I have a business standpoint from the board, she's got a teacher standpoint, and then our admin team also helps with the finance committee. So I feel like we work pretty well of getting everyone's perspective.
Good. Let's flip the coin over here. Are there some of these that this board needs to redouble their efforts on or bring closer to the front burner? And if so, which would they be?
Given the way you set it up, I don't want to say Jeff's name, but I like what Jeff helps us with sometimes on our assessing our own performance. And I think what's nice is if we all kind of felt like we're doing great, then we're never going to get any better. So I like it when people can say, hang on, are we doing this the right way, or did we question that? So you'll come with some questions, Jeff, that we've talked about in the past, which I think keeps us moving forward. So I appreciate it.
I'm going to give you some editorial here. Most organizations are pretty poor at self-assessment and pretty poor at leadership assessment. So I'd like to draw something for you that you can think about as you move along with this. If you do a feedback or evaluation once a year, it's referred to in the research as an autopsy, which I think is a great phrase. So there are three ways to take a look at, let's look at the executive director first. And so, how is he or she doing on our strategic plan? How is he or she doing on their job description? And how is he or she doing on what I would call other stuff? Moving the organizational image along, making sure that the trains are sort of running on time, if you will. Well, what happens is, in a perfect world, You do this at 90 days. A non-quorum group of board members, 1 or 2 or 3, sit down with Cecilia and provide some feedback that they've gleaned from other board members, probably other teachers, other community members, and say, hey, this is where it seems like we are on the strategic plan in your role. You know, we're giving you an 86 or we give you a B plus or whatever. And on your job description, these parts are going well, these might need more attention. And then here's this slippery other area called other stuff. And you might redouble your efforts over here, but we'd like to pat you on the back for this. The board, that same group should see her at 180, 270, and then finally at 365 you do the evaluation. And you have 3 data bundles to meld into the final evaluation. The worst case scenario is that you meet with Celia in April and go, say, we're like talking about the last 9 months, here's how it went. Well, there's not a lot of chance for correction there. Board, you should also evaluate your own work on how are we doing as a board on the strategic plan, right? How are we delivering our own job description and then the elusive other stuff? Boards occasionally think this should be 80% of it and these are 10 and 10. That's not a balanced perspective. And that'll come out if you do it on a regular basis. So for you to lock yourselves in, order some more good pizza and food, and spend an hour discussing the board's performance on this, and also then hearing from a small group on the results that went back to Cecilia, then you're going to start not missing things, right? You're going to start getting better coverage on all 3 of these important areas, and I guarantee you that even if it's done informally at 90 days, where it's just a discussion, it's better than not doing it at all. Because you can't afford to let somebody go down the track the wrong way for 270 days or more. Then there are a lot of school districts and charter schools that don't do evaluation ever. But there are a lot, more than half of my clients are schools and governments and nonprofit, but I work in business. We also don't do performance reviews well in most businesses, and corporate boards rarely take a look at their work. If they're making money and people aren't getting hurt, we must be doing a good job. I'm oversimplifying that. There are places that do it a lot differently. But could we take a couple minutes and speak about the potential of this for director feedback and evaluation as well as board director evaluation? What are your thoughts?
So a couple of comments on that. When you talk about 10 basic responsibility board, the one I would have also selected was selected executives. Selected executives because it dovetails on this, because we're obviously in the process of looking for a permanent director. And your comments here are a good example of some of our challenges, which is we're trying to nail down the job description. You know, we just came out of a situation where it didn't quite work and we're not sure why. I mean, it could have been a poor job description, we didn't identify the right tasks, incomplete expectations, reviews weren't conducted, all of the above.
Perfect storm.
Right, perfect storm, and kind of where you start. The comment I do want to make is the whole concept of communication. Because how do we capture all the comments from the entire board to give to the director? So right now we have a kind of a pyramid, right? We hope it works, and we communicate to Dan, and then we get Cecilia. We try not to step on each other's toes because we don't want to duplicate work, cause confusion, and sometimes we do inadvertently because we might have a hallway conversation, and Dan had one yesterday, and we have 2 different opinions. But I didn't know Dan even had that conversation. And we didn't even know, and a lot of it is actually good stuff. But then, now we're getting to open meeting stuff, because we can't have that conversation with enough people to educate all these communications while doing it in an open meeting.
Right.
So how do we balance that against the fact that we don't want 5-hour open meetings?
Oh my God.
Right?
By the way, you guys, there are so many charter school boards that meet till midnight or later.
Right.
And I'm like, that's cruel and unusual. That's so wrong.
And Dan's like, and he's right. But we're at a place where we're still navigating how do we get the information out.
Yep.
Have the proper dialogue not want to follow the, open meeting law, but at the same time, gather all that information and share honestly and open. And I don't feel like we're quite there yet. We have weird glitches, but we just have to work through it. But
And to make your next hire, many educational organizations hire like the Vikings draft in the 11th round. They want the best athlete available. Well, that's not enough. Because what you're trying to do is different than every other charter and the majority of pre-K-12 publics. I would advocate that you're making a little different mission and vision. So you're going to have 4 or 5 key initiatives that come out of your strategic plan. You want to find somebody who's been there and done that. We don't want somebody who goes, I can't wait to try to do those. We want to hire somebody that says, I know how to do those, and I can provide an example for you in the interview of what I did in another place to make it work. And here's a reference I can give you that you can check on that. You also will find this in the job description. The job description will be 40 pages long. But as you get better at the strategic plan, you're going to find there are 5 or 6 key areas if you want your next executive director to be able to do well, and you'll interview for those things. You'll also interview for, tell us about how you've worked in other places to tidy up and make regular communication. How have you helped boards avoid 5-hour meetings and get stuff done through your role as an information dispenser? Once you build this thing, it's way easier to go find him or her because you know what you're shopping for. You're not just wandering through the grocery store aisles. That was a little more editorial than perhaps you were looking for. What do you think?
I do want to add one last nuance to this, and I'm going to give an example to be careful with, which is a person that has done it before might still not be the right fit for our organization. And where it's going to come out is they do things their way because they did it before and they were in fact successful. But MSA is a different organization, so I'm looking for knowledge, education, but flexibility, self-awareness, self-reflection, the ability to learn, the ability to adapt, all those additional soft skills that I have no clue how to interview for.
Dan, we're excited you're interviewing. Tell us about a time in your last role as an educational leader where your board made an unbelievably poor decision and you had to challenge them on it. What did you do? Tell us how it played out and give us the name of the board member that can back up your answer. If he's never done it, he'll tell you that. Or worse, if he invents it but can't provide a reference, we know he's not going to get it. Or tell us about a time when the board really stalled and you helped them put a little gas in the tank and make a decision quicker. And then you'll hear sort of how he's done. You go, well, that would work here. Or you put those electronic training aids on people's necks. We're not going to, what I mean? But as you get better at doing what you want, you're going to make a better hire. You'll also onboard better because you'll know what's important. And you're going to be wise enough not to hire somebody that goes, well, if you just put me on, I can get this done. Okay, next interview. I want to also mention, Jeff, you all have full-time work and lives and families and other things going on. But if we can take a small group of the board whose job is to sound out other board members, right, in non-quorum situations, so would you go to these 3 board members and you talk to these 3, and we'll get that information, we'll assemble it, we'll put it into an informal document, probably no more than 1 page. It'll be sort of good news, average news, and things we want to see more of, and hand it off. It galvanizes the board because, well, you're right, I was more worried about that, but I can see the other board members are worried about this. I mean, just going through this, I think will make the weave of your organization a little tighter. Let's move. There's a piece of qualities of effective board members on page 4 in that same packet. I asked you the same thing here. Could you call out a compliment around the room? Tell us somebody who does one of these really, really well. Who's a model for some of these individual effective board behaviors?
I'll actually start with Dan because the time and energy that he spent during this whole search for the director and all of the chaos that was created around that was pretty fantastic. So,
great contribution.
Yeah,
It was a team.
I know it was a team, but Dan, you were a volunteer and you did a lot of work to get us where we are today.
Thank you.
I will say that I would recognize, everybody in this case, but I will say.
Thank you.
I will
call out Annie. The conviction that MSA as a public charter school is important and our mission is important has been at the forefront of many of Annie's statements as one of the first things.
Dynamite. Very good. Very good. Jeff, what do you think?
Well, and just a thought, I mean, it's every teacher. The commitment to this school is phenomenal. I've always attributed our success to the students and the teachers by far.
Very good. You know, I've had a chance to work with charter schools and open schools and alternative schools since the late 80s. And, you know, people get there sort of two routes. I can't wait to be doing it, or, you know, it's my last shot at getting something done. Those people don't typically last. But if people don't show up with a lot of verve and vigor, they get it. Because they're in a place where people are really sort of apostles for a movement on how things are getting done. And people just get more mojo than they do in my experience in regular pre-K-12 districts. How about another compliment? Who does one of these things well?
I want to call out Jennifer because I think these last two, both courage and communicating well, I appreciate that, you know, sometimes our board can kind of have this groupthink mentality where a lot of people are pushing us one way and it's tempting to just kind of be quiet. But Jennifer will speak up and say, as a matter of fact, you know, I disagree with all y'all. And here's the answer. So I appreciate that because that's hard to do. So I say both courage and also I think you can communicate your position clearly. Thank you.
I'd say Michelle, for loyalty of the democratic process, sometimes I'm a little emotional. She's the policy. Gives me the calmness of that kind of stuff. So I really love that.
Very good. Very good. Another compliment?
I'm going to do a shout out to Cody for able to communicate well with others and always being inclusive. So that's
Thank you.
awesome.
And that, by the way, he's an MSA graduate, am I correct? Yeah, see, that's a double compliment there. A bonus compliment.
And also to Jeff, who time and energy that he spends on board business and task force and stuff is amazing. The history he brings along with it, and that knowledge is amazing.
Very cool. Very cool. On page 5, I put this in based on some of the original potential concerns to be addressed here. And the research on school board members from pre-K-12 districts, not necessarily charter schools, indicates that more than 65% of the people that come to those positions have management or supervisory or ownership experience. So I often tell board members, you know, if I told you that my car wouldn't start, 6 of you would be out there with jumper cables in 5 minutes trying to make something happen. And while we like that, you need to run the place as a board, right? And so you got to be able to know when to say, geez, Eric, you're pretty juiced about this, but pull up, brother. You know, we could be down in the weeds too long on this. And Eric's got to have the chutzpah to go, you're probably right. That, you know, that's I can get down there too quickly. So yeah, thanks for mentioning that. The items at the top, and I don't want you to think about the board prior to July 1. I want you to think about the board from here on out. Are any of the bullets under the micromanagement test things that the board could inadvertently stumble over this year?
So some of our board members are like department chairs.
Correct.
So they're kind of sitting in a place where...
Two hats.
So, but I feel like most of them will understand the separation. So, but looking in from the outside, I could see that as being a potential micromanaging observation. But
Cody, the charter school boards that I've worked with where it's been a real problem, here's how it plays out. The board goes, well, we got two options, A or B. And a teacher goes, well-intended, well, A is the only way to do it if we're going to do it here. Well, okay, you're the teacher, let's do it A. You know, and then that's where somebody's got to go, hey, I respectfully disagree, that's not how this is supposed to be. God bless you, but take off your teacher hat, stick on your board hat, and let's make sure that we're talking about this from a board and a policy level as opposed to down to the operational. And the operational is way more interesting because that's where kids are and that's where employees are, and we want it to work for both of them. But there's a real temptation to go, you're a teacher here, how do you think we ought to do this thing? At one point, the Elk River Board was run by the superintendent. The superintendent ran each board meeting. And I walked in one day and the board chair was saying, so what do we do here? And he goes, well, here's what the boards ought to do this time. And so you ought to make a motion to this. Well, I'll make a motion. I was like, this train is going off the rails, and it did soon after. But there's this balance you're trying to get, which is making the place work as well as possible for kids and employees and family, and running the board. And somebody's got to have the ability at one now and then to go, oh, hey, we inadvertently are crossing that line, or we're approaching that line. Are there any other items from the top half here that you might stumble into this year based on what you're doing, where you're going, what's coming up?
The third bullet is where I stumble. And I'll explain myself. Because I'm a parent board member, and I hear from parents, why is that happening? Why is that decision made? And I don't know. And then I feel bad because I'm on the board, and I should know. So I can teach. Yeah.
God bless you.
I should know.
I worked with a superintendent that had 4,000 employees, and we got to the board. And one board member said, you know, if I'm in the grocery store and somebody says, hey, why did they let go of the 5th grade basketball coach over our 4th elementary, I should know. I said, unless you got an S on your chest, there's no way you can know. The answer is, if it happened just that way, I'll look into it. Or do you want to call back from me, or do you want to call from the athletic director? Because you guys are running a tight shop, you still can't know it. And I think parents also, one of my favorite lines that I read in the MSBA document today, was a parent said to a board member, it's my constitutional right to be as mean to you as I want. Well, that's not what that person is asking, but that's terrifying. But I also think it's terrible when anybody thinks that, well, because you're the board, you should know. If we're not careful, we try to defend it. And the answer is I sidestep and I say, if it happened just that way, I didn't know about it. I'll look into it. Do you want to call back from our director, or do you want to call from that grade level chair? Because you just can't tangle up in that. It's just too messy. I also, from Sartell, we had an equity audit at Sartell that kind of went sour and followed the thing. Apparently, some 3rd grader said to her mom, while mom was looking at her filling out an online survey, a 3rd grader, hey, what are you doing? I'm filling out an equity survey. Let me look at that. We're told not to let our moms and dads look at that. Now, I'm just going to break something to you that might be news. Not every 3rd grader understands everything or tells the truth the entire time. The community went bat feces crazy, and that kid ended up on Fox News with the mother being interviewed. So it sort of went south for the wrong reason. That's why I believe as a board member, we have to be able to sidestep and say, if it happened just that way, I missed it. I'll look into it. Do you want to call back from her or him?
I think the other thing that does is it sets a behavior then. We start changing expectations and the board becomes the face of what we want ourselves to be. That happens once and then it happens again and again and again and again. Eventually the parents start understanding this is the framework and the questions start changing because we're changing that expectation.
Yeah. And by the way, I know why that means a lot to you and why you're asking me as a parent, but the answer is, if it happened that way, I didn't hear about it, I'd be happy to have them ring you.
But is that directing the director to do something? Shouldn't I just say, I don't know, call the director?
Even better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even better. But if this person is well intended.
Then it's like I'm being bossy with the director.
That's where you can say, I had this conversation with somebody in the grocery store.
Yeah.
You made me get the call from Bruce Miles, it was all hopped up in the vegetable aisle, and I told him to give you a ring, here's the issue that he thought. Everything.
Kind of a related issue, but not directly, is once again dovetails back to the concept of communication. A lot of times we do it well, and there's some that I think are obvious misses, where we should have got ahead of it. But we almost invited questioning, because the obvious ones, we should have known people were gonna ask. And we were absolutely silent about it.
Oh.
I can't even think about a perfect example. And we just have to over time educate ourselves and getting a better feel for what a parent might want to hear, or whoever. And I can't, it's always a one-by-one situation, but we've had a few misses and we just need to think a little bit more.
So one of the last steps in your strategic plan is deciding how to deliver the information. So your strategic plan will end up with a lot of detail, but I want you to have one sheet that is sort of so simple that anybody can understand. And we'll say, so who's going to deliver this to parents, right? Who delivered this to anybody else who needs to know? Do we have any allied or affiliated agencies? Who's going to take this back to our sponsor? The communication plan says we not only have our strategic plan, but we know exactly how to go tell graduates about it, how to tell potential. Because it should be simple enough, we can show it to people, they go, that's pretty compelling, nice work.
By the way, the other piece of communications is being timely.
Yeah. Let me shift gears very quickly. The bottom, and this, Jazar here is a pretty spicy author. And he goes into a lot of places where boards are really sideways and having a difficult time. Are there any of the items numbered 1 through 6 in the bottom half of the page that need a little more work here?
Well, I will say,
You can take that mask, thanks.
number 5, elements of micromanagement in response to crisis. As definitely, well, since March of 2020, we've kind of been in response to crisis mode for about a year and a half. And because there's just too many fires all at once.
Yeah.
So we definitely had elements where it's just response to crisis.
On fire.
And to Michelle's point, it gets back up. This was, I think especially when the administration, when the director was gone, the board had to step in some ways outside of their lane. And then some staff got used to, including parents, to going to board members for things that they should go to administration for. So, I've had a couple conversations with board members saying, let's try to steer that now to back where it belongs to Kate and Leela and I, so that we can be successful. So that we don't continue patterns of indirectly, have things come directly to us so that we can be successful. So
Dan, as a teacher, I know exactly why this would bother you, and I'm glad you called me, but in reality, I think this probably ought to go to admin first. Let me know how that goes for you, and how about them Vikings or whatever. But that subtle redirect that says, we've got a system now to work with, as opposed to, I'm going to carry water for you on this. Any of the other 6 that are potentially troubling us here?
Bruce, what are board members most afraid of?
One more time.
Number 6,
Yeah.
board members are afraid. In your experience, what are they afraid of?
I don't know how to teach math, and he teaches math really well here. And he tells me that he needs more money for the math curriculum, and I am afraid about pissing him out. Well, I'll take that to the board. I'll do the shorthanded work as opposed to asking him to go back and work within the system. The afraid that I typically see is, I'm afraid to say no to employees because I respect them so much and I don't want to be in a position to say no. I know you need more math resource, and so I'll lobby for you at the board.
One of the things, we had a lot of kind of tough decisions, I would say, maybe more so, can't speak for the past, but one of the things that I can say I was afraid of was making sure we as the board did the right thing and not like the popular thing. So it was difficult to kind of sit in front, I will say it, others can choose to not to or whatever. I found it difficult to sit there and listen to kind of both sides and try to still say, okay, what do we need to do as a school? And I think we did a great job doing it, but I think if we're honest, we're probably a little bit afraid of some of our board meetings because we're like, it's going to be an interesting one, right? So you're going to have parents that are going to get At least I did, right after the board meeting or during, getting texts and emails and from one side or the other. And you're kind of afraid of, did we do it right? Because I can stand behind right. I don't know that I can stand behind popular, so that was difficult because sometimes the popular one is tempting. You want to do the popular thing and have everyone be your friend, like you, but then that wasn't what we were called for. Actually, we were called to do what was best for the school. So that's where the fear comes in a little bit.
And I'm afraid right now there's actually an article in a magazine called Politico that analyzes political trends. And there's a big article in there today. It was in the MSBA clipping service. Do y'all subscribe to MSBA clipping service, right? Okay, so, and Politico said that the Republican Party is pushing people to get involved at the school board level, and they're running wannabe board member boot camps. And school board meetings in some of your public pre-K-12 districts are turning into cage matches. I mean, just brutal. So as you start to think about doing your own evaluation, I'd like you to make sure that you're setting up situations where people speak respectfully, because you do have students that understand what happened in meetings. And I want them to see mature adults making mature decisions in a rational way, as opposed to screaming matches and having armed guards. And I probably didn't need to go there, but that stuff pisses me. Can I take you to the actual, the detailed agenda?
So that's on the other handout.
Yep, the other handout. And on page 2, there are 4 discussion topics there. Core values, vision, mission, preferences, communication, and chain of command. Some people here have actually printed out the vision and mission in detail. We also have it at the top on the same handout on page 1. So prior to getting into strategic planning, a number of board members in their phone calls suggested that it would benefit this group to start to talk through vision and mission, where it might be fitting, where it might be a little tweaking. We're not going to do it. We won't be wordsmithing here, but could we start with some reflections on current vision and mission from those of you in the room? I will take off my mask and address the crowd.
For mission and vision, one of the things that I appreciated the last time that they did a significant review where they were actually changing some of the words was that they created it in such a way that these are excellent larger goals, but the words are open-ended enough that we can change our strategic plan to reflect a number of different iterations of MSA without needing to change our mission and vision. So yes, we are a growing school, for sure. A small school field doesn't necessarily need a class size of 10. We can make things happen in a lot of different ways that MSA is going to develop over time. So I like the phrasing that they're clear goals, but the words are open enough that we can shift our plan to how to still continue to meet the mission.
Thank you. Other observations?
I actually have a question for you. If this was a brand new charter school and you were helping them build a mission and a vision, how would you define that? Like, how would you set it up so that the discussion could be focused on, here's what a mission is, here's what a vision is?
So how many coffee shops are there within 5 miles of this place? Dozen? Well, if there's a dozen, that means there are 50 unemployed strategic planning consultants drinking coffee in there right now, arguing over what's vision and what's mission. Okay?
That's why I'm asking the question.
Right. So here's the vision for the Big River Group. Ready? 40-foot boat, Lake Superior, craft beer. Do you have any question about what I'm trying to get to? Because a vision is a new ideal state. It's ambitious. It will require a lot of work, but it's a new perfect location. It's a perfect place to be. And I'll bring some definitions, and the team that goes through the training will have those. Mission is job description to get there. So the mission for the Big River Group is we help people run better organizations, whether it's boards or individual leaders. And I want to draw you something that I think you can put it in perspective. And these, this does not represent time, but at the top of this funnel There's hard data and soft data. So hard data is all the stuff we know. We can measure. We can measure expenditures, we can measure student outcomes, all the stuff that we can measure. Soft data are people's perceptions on the questions you want to ask. There's a lot of soft data out there that you don't need to, frankly, take into account. But there's a lot of soft data you're going to want specific on topics important to you. As you filter this, you then develop your vision and say, here's where we'd like to be in 3 to 5 years. Here's what we want it to look like. You then develop your mission, and that's the job description that'll specifically get that done. You then develop priorities, and these are near term and they eventually change. But a priority is something you're going to take on that's probably going to take between 6 months and 2 years to nail down. You're probably going to have 4 or 5 priorities when you're done. For each priority, you have a benchmark. And the benchmark, on priority number 1, the board says, admin, here's what we want out of this priority. Here's what we want. Go back and develop a work plan for us to get there. And then the bottom is work plans. What happens when there's conflict is that boards jump around from some data to what are we doing about it. Or if we've got a parent group that's a little unhappy, they go, we want to know why this is happening. And if you try to defend something that's happening down there out of context, it's a really short discussion. Well, boy, I can see, Dan, as a parent, why you'd be concerned about that. Let me take you back to what we know, where we're trying to go, and why we picked that. Because we didn't pick that work plan in isolation. It's part of a theme that allowed us to get there. Right? And typically down here, these are sort of binary discussions. Why are you doing this? Why aren't you doing this? Well, it took a long time to get there, and it's not really a binary discussion. It was a much bigger discussion. And again, this will be one of the tools that we hand out to people during planning, so the people that help in planning can say, okay, we're asking you about this, we're asking you about this, we're asking you about this. We want your feedback so we can bring it to the board. That was a long answer to a short question. But vision is that new perfect destination that we can envision. It's way over there. I can see it. I don't know how to get there yet. Our mission is what we're going to do to get ready and start making progress. And our priorities are going to be some steps we can take to get way over there within 3 to 5 years. What are your thoughts, though, about your current vision and mission? Because the idea isn't to throw it out. You have to honor it, and you've got to make it grow. So tell us what you like or don't like, or where you see some potential for analyzing or adjusting.
I just want to say, so part of our vision is the lifelong learners and global citizens, which is a long-term thing.
Yep.
And I feel like we're now at the stage of our organization where we have enough graduates to measure if that's accurate and not just me. But I feel like I fit that well, but I think many of my classmates also do. So
Cody, some of the richest data for planning should come from graduates that are between 18 and 25 years old. Because they're a monster litmus test for what we're trying to do. And they also still have very clear data about how things have worked. So as we get further into this, Cecilia, if we can actually have a focus group of those people, that's a gift. The problem, most pre-K-12 districts find it by accident, and in reality they're a monster data source.
I think one thing on the vision, I think you brought it up really well, the lifelong learners and global citizens. I think one of the opportunities, I love the way the vision is written. I think one of the opportunities is around the idea of mentor or teacher or leader. So lifelong learners is a very input-oriented goal, but what's the output of that? Like, I want to create a learner that's teaching other people to learn, or that's teaching the next generation or something like that. So a little flavor of that somewhere in here.
And again, that unanticipated outcome that students are now mentoring well for the student body as opposed to individuals. You're obviously making some progress there. Let's see if we can get a little gas in that tank.
I also really, you can tell a lot of work went into it before my time, and whoever was part of that, kudos to them. And it was one of the reasons why we continue to go as a parent, right? Because it was consistent with the vision that we're trying to see with our kids. One thing I think we're missing, and you could argue whether it's mission vision or if it's in the values, is the equity, inclusion, that sort of bit. That's the phrase that we're using now. The phrase has changed. That's not the point. The point is, I see all these core values are fantastic, but I feel like we could ratchet up a little bit
Yes.
in this equity and inclusion sort of bit, just to be very explicit about that. That's important to us as well. Very good.
I echo you on the core values element, Dan. In the vision, we have global citizenship, but we don't really see a fleshing out of that in core values. And I think that that would be an excellent opportunity
Maybe
to
it's
flesh
another
that
point or
out.
something.
Yeah, I really do.
And typically, core values are sort of right here, right? They sort of start the planning. You've got enough experience now within the organization, enough history, where for you to move right from data to vision would be okay. But you could also say to the administration, please come back and adjust these based on our discussion.
And I'm hoping that we take Dan's comment about diversity, equity, and inclusion needing to be reflected somehow and needing to have a focus. And yes, I'd love to see that in the core values to kind of get deeper into global citizen. And also I would love to see it in the priorities. So however we decide, I think the priorities come from you all, but I'm hoping I can, lead from behind here, lead from underneath to, influence some, focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and priorities. Sure.
I'd be stunned if it didn't come up. In Sartell, they fired the company that brought it in based on the comment from the third grader, and then some overreactionary parents and one former board member she could muck up a 2-card parade. She's a very difficult human being. And so the equity study was shelved. All the effort, all the money, and the poor guys running the equity organization took tremendous heat unjustly. And God bless third graders, but if that's your only data source, I think we're going down the wrong direction.
See, I see the diversity inclusion, I see it in the mission. I don't think we need to change the mission. I see that as a global citizen, your child becomes just so loving to other people and aware, and I just don't think we need to.
Actually, I have a question for you on this one, because maybe I'm poking at the wrong place that you're talking about here, but when we talk about the vision and the mission, there's a level of interpretation that the executive director or who it is going to apply to that to get to a set of priorities. So I don't know if we would actually set the priorities. You set the priorities, and we say,
as we say up in central Minnesota,
okay,
use guys when you're setting the priorities.
Okay, because what I'm thinking about is the how. So if we say global citizens, and that's where I'm talking about like inclusion and diversity and equity. There's definitely hows that are in there that isn't us that's doing it.
That's us.
And I wouldn't necessarily, this is just me, I wouldn't necessarily say inclusion in a vision, but global citizens, for example, can infer many different things, one of which is inclusion, or one of which could be 30% live in Europe and outside of the US because they're global citizens. It doesn't really matter what it looks like, but there's a lot of interpretation that can go in there on how we build that. Is that correct? Yeah.
Well, and I fully agree. And I already I was on the board previously, so I have the full strategic plan, and so that I would have the information. So when we're looking at our mission and vision, the core values, these separate 5 bullet points, I think that's where we have an area where we could really grow as an organization in terms of what we have as those core values. So when we're talking about well-rounded individuals are people who interact with others respectfully, who understand that there are multiple cultures, that there are multiple different ways that people show their skills and things. So then, as you see these, that's why I like the open-ended nature of the words. And then it becomes more defining in terms of how we want to reach that. The board can say these are excellent core values, and then the drill down about how that core value, so respect is one of our core values. How is it that we evidence that, becomes like the how we have a team, the teaching teams, things like that. So I like the idea of the mission vision being sort of open-ended, but then our core values get just a smidge more specific at the board level, and then they can be followed through with in a lot of different initiatives.
I have another charter school that also had to let a director go, and it was not a pretty event. And the board got unbelievably wound up about how the vision ought to be. Our vision ought to attract people to us. Well, then you're going to spend a lot of time on a vision. This is what attracts people to you. When you're about this and this and this and this, and you knock those out of the park, that's why people get, is there any teaching jobs open there? How do I get my kids in? This is the operational part of your plan. This is, and this has to be done. You can't just do the bottom alone, or else you just end up wandering around doing random acts and hoping they pay off. So you'll get through this and do this with feedback from others. You'll make the final decisions. But man, this is all, and you guys will absolutely be involved in identifying priorities and a benchmark for each one. And you say, admin, come back with blueprints that show us we're going to get that done so that we can review them and approve. I'm going to jump to the very next bullet there, this number 2 in that list talks about committee work. I want to just give you a real quick picture. So for every initiative in your strategic plan, right? So let's just say, for example, in the strategic plan, you guys are going to have a priority regarding communication. So you're going to benchmark and you say, here's what we as a board want for effective communication, right? We're going to sort of say, see that stake, it's about halfway on there? That's where we want to be. Come back with a blueprint that shows us that we're going to get there, that we can review and eventually approve. And then we can also make sure that you're doing your job on communication and we're doing our job. And then we're actually going to put a communication subcommittee together here. And my favorite story is about a district in north central Minnesota where there's a transportation committee within the school district. And the transportation committee comes and says, hey board, here's what we decided you ought to do regarding buses. And I thought, what are you all smoking? The board tells you what to do and then you figure out the best way to do it. No. We decide what kind of buses to buy and which ones are going to be propane and which ones are... No, see, committees don't tell the board what to do. Board says to the committee, here's what we want you to do. Come back with administration and show us the blueprint to get that done. So committee work in a perfect world, because you all have been doing a lot of work being a collective executive director as well as board members, is I want you to make sure you dispatch all these committees that have the right kind of people on them that are ready to do the work you want done and bring you back evidence through administration that the work can be done so you can approve it. So I don't know how your committee structure works now, but you will have ad hoc committees for each of your key priorities, because your admin's already got full-time jobs, your teachers have full-time jobs, but we've got to be able to put some likely suspects on those committees that can do the work the board wants done. So we'll spend a little bit more time about that in your wrap-up session.
You can say that one more time. Is the committee you're suggesting there is made up of who? Board members, administration, other volunteers, or what? I missed that part.
I would say, I believe it's best practice for every standing committee related to a priority that a board member sits on that. Right? They're the liaison back about what that committee's doing. We'd probably have administration on. We'd probably have an employee or two. We could have a couple of other parents. Hey, you run a marketing company, and we're not going to ask you to be on the board for the rest of your life, but we think we've got about 6 months of work in this initiative. Would you come on and be a committee member in an area you already know how to do? Or you've always talked about having your kids here. We've got a committee spot for you, and it's in a sweet spot that you already know how to do. Would you give us some time?
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought you had. So we currently do a version of that.
We have a pretty good
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were
set of
suggesting something
committees.
different or not.
Yeah.
The other piece that's interesting that you should mention, using communications as a committee. Let's use that as an example. One thing that you can help us with is help us determine actually your function. Because we actually had an issue with that. The committee was formed because things need to be done or being done. I mean, is this an advisory group or just to help administration or what? I mean,
So we met yesterday, the communication Advisory.
Yes,
Committee,
yeah.
Communication Advisory Task Force, actually. And they wanted to talk about their role, and they did decide, I went and Kate went, they are advisory to administration.
Is that a standing committee?
It is, we also talked about, it would be nice if they had some work and some goals, and they had what does success look like?
Okay.
When could they be done?
So I don't know how many standing committees do you have? Finance committee
Yep,
and any others?
oh yeah.
Policy.
Policy, academics,
Expansion.
expansion.
Yeah.
And then some that are more
If you
like task
don't, if you
forces.
don't give them
Academics.
work, they'll go do things you might not want them to do.
Yeah.
So again, let's just assume that we get all the way down here in the plan and you have 4 or 5 priorities. And I'll just say, so let's just say that one's expansion, one's communication, one's rigor and achievement, one is board member rate, whatever. Well, what happens is as you benchmark those, you say, here's what we want out of expansion. Like, we don't want to grow crazy, we want to grow in an organized manner. And here's sort of our bound. You're going to almost do the Oprah Winfrey box for each of these. And then we hand it off to the expansion committee and say, boy, if you guys really want to be on this, we're excited to have you, but you have to do the work we're giving you. You don't get to just wander off into left field and do some other stuff that you think might be beneficial. You have to agree to do the work we're giving you that we've benchmarked. And then the script either goes yes or no, and you go with it. So in my experience, this might be a time when you can let some standing committees, you can kind of bless and release them, because your committees now will be related to your key priorities. Without a doubt, the finance committee stays on, right? Do you have an executive committee that meets so the board doesn't have to?
Sort of. So Dan and Maggie and I meet pre and post meeting to set the agenda and debrief.
I would keep that group too, because they get a chance to make it even more nimble around here. But if you're going to have some other committee, you better tell them what to do, or they may wander off into left field, and then you've got to rein them back in, which creates hard feelings and a loss of political capital.
Yeah, actually, though, I think our issue may be a little bit different from that, which is, in the past, and I'm glad we evolved over that, but in the past, we had committees do the work because it wasn't being done. We could deconstruct that to see whether that is actually wise or not, but it happened, and thank God that's the past.
Yeah.
But we want to have a better sense of what some of these committees need to do so that no one questions us and says, well, wait a minute, why is the administration doing that? And it's because the board decided we have a structure and we're okay with that. Because if you really look at our resources, we're small. Right? I mean, you're looking at a group plus 3 kind of thing. So we understand that, and we're okay having volunteers help with that to relieve the load if it makes sense.
Yep.
And those are the conversations we need to polish up that so that we don't get questioned, the administration or board is like, why didn't you do that? That doesn't make sense. That wasn't a good way of allocating resources.
You'll have that discussion right here. You know, and so finance committee, you know what you're doing. We want to make sure that you're followed up. So here's a part of the plan for you, and we're asking you to be that communication committee. You'll absolutely be able to sort of start to put names and faces to that. Should we take a minute now and talk through what you'll do in your strategic planning? Would that be of help to you? There are a couple more items on here that we could go through that include communication, confidentiality, and chain of command. These are things that came up in conversations with individuals. Do you want to go through those right now, or would you prefer to talk about strategic planning?
I prefer strategic.
Okay. Well, here's the proposal and the contract. It doesn't mean it can't be altered to make it fit better. But step 1 is we put together online surveys for employees and for community. You could have a specific one for students or a specific one for graduates. We can slice and dice. But we'll ask the same questions in each so that you're going to be able to lay the data side by side and see irregularities as well as trends. Surveys will be open for about 2 business weeks, and then we will prepare summaries. The surveys will go out and we won't be able to see who they came from. We will set it up so only one response can come from one device. But we'll end up and be able to bring you some summaries and say, here's what your community said, here's what your employees said, here's what your students said, and you'll be able to kind of go, oh, okay, that's interesting, or I wonder why that happened, right? It's the first bundle here. I'll then do some training with a team that you'll put together to the board's satisfaction, and there'll probably be 3 or 4 or 5 people in it. And all they're going to have to do is go through a 90-minute simulation with me about how to use the planning tools. And the first tool they'll learn how to use is that 2x2 grid that you did. So every subgroup that you meet with, that you assemble, will do that 2x2 grid, and they're going to tell you what they think's working, not working, what better than they thought, as well as things not going well. Each focus group will also work on a vision exercise. They will tell you the elements they think that ought to be in the next vision, right? And you'll be able to cut and paste them into your current one or start to redirect. But we have to make it clear to every focus group that your work is advisory, not binding. The board makes the final decisions.
Can you step back, and so there will be an online survey,
Yes?
and then some people will also be invited to participate in a face-to-face or virtual focus group.
Yes, and I believe that boards and administration should get tremendous amounts of political capital through planning. So in some older strategic planning models, people would get invited to be there. I think you invite everybody. I mean, I don't ever want to have a board say, "Well, we could really use you, but we don't need you." I mean, that's the wrong message. So you will schedule the meetings, be they in person or virtual, and provide 3 or 4 or 5 opportunities for people to come together and provide their thoughts and sentiments that's advisory to the board regarding soft data, 2x2 grid, the elements that they think ought to shape the next iteration of your vision. And they'll also provide some feedback to you about what they think the priorities ought to be for the next couple of years. With the understanding that there's no organization, if 3M wants to put on 50 priorities, God bless them. If you take on more than 4 or 5, it'll crush you. I'd rather have you do an incredible job on 3 of them than have 9 of them. I'm working with a very, very, very small district up north, and they have a strategic plan to fill this room. And they spent $35,000 on it, and there's nothing in there that's usable because you could give it to the Miami-Dade County schools in Florida and they would have a hard time producing it. So in those input sessions, they'll see the survey summary so they can see what other people think. They'll go through that soft data exercise, vision recommendations, priority recommendations. When those are all over, I'll assemble a packet for you with survey results as well as results of all of those sessions, and you'll have that well in advance. You then will go through a final planning session where you start to make any adjustments to the vision you want based on what you've learned. You will tell administration to come back to you with potential changes to mission. You will select the final priorities, and for every priority you'll identify a benchmark. So for every priority you'll say, admin, here's how far we want to be a year from now on that. Here's what we ought to see a year from now if we've really done this well. Go develop the work plans and bring them back to us for review, potential edit, and eventual approval. I call this chainsaw planning because it's dramatically simpler, but this is what my business clients do quickly. My business clients execute well but don't often plan. My schools plan unbelievably well but are hamstrung by so many factors it's hard to execute. So we're trying to make something here that gets to execution pretty quickly.
Maybe just to make it a little more concrete, sorry, this is a specific example, but on expansion. So if we as a board say, we've identified the fact that we need to expand, and here's why, it's for financial reasons, it's for whatever. I like the Oprah Winfrey model, it's kind of like we need to have this many people in order to be black in so many years in the country. Then that would be a priority, we can set up a committee if you will, but I was trying to follow the next one, your benchmark and your work plans. Should the board have, if we did it rightly, should we have handed that over to administration and say, here's where we think the school needs to be, please come back with the plan on how we do that?
Exactly. So here's what happens when you're doing benchmarks. So what do we want? How should we start? And what should we see? And so you'd say to the administration, here's what we want regarding expansion. Admin should come back and say, there was 438 ways to start, but here are the 5 things or 3 things or 2 things or 9 things that we think we ought to do right away to get rolling. And board, we ought to be able to show you this much product at 30 days and this much product at 90 days. And you either look at that and go, throw that out, or we want to see more at 30 or less. I mean, you tell them what you want, and administration's, it's like saying, admin, come back with a blueprint. I want a 5-bedroom home, 2.5 baths, 2-car garage, walkout basement. And we ought to be able to say, it ought to be so complete that bring in somebody to do the excavation, to do this, and bring in somebody to do concrete work, and frame it up, and pull the, I mean, all those parts have to come together. I don't want you swinging hammers or cutting boards. You tell us what you want, administration comes back with the blueprints, and you go, whoa, that looks like it's gonna work, or maybe not.
So using your example, if on your house, if administration says, you know, that land won't work for a walkout basement, so I want to bring this back to you to say, what would you like to do? Is that part of it? So like for an academic goal, we want all the kids acing their AP tests next year. We might come back and say, here's something that's more reasonable.
No, here's what I said. You know, board, that was a great benchmark, but after further reflection.
Okay.
But I think that's legitimate. That's the push and pull. But then, you know, eventually the board does have 51% of the decision in that conversation. I mean, you can advocate like crazy for the 49%, but the board goes, yeah, but jump in, Jeff.
So do you have a survey question, going back to that? Is that something you help create, or how does that work?
I'll draft them and send them to the executive director. The executive director can, you know, in most places I work, you know, so you are going to be doing this, so there's a non-quorum. Run it by them. You can put as many fingerprints on as you want. I typically start with 2 open-ended questions because, in my experience, it just yields. People write paragraphs. What 2 or 3 things are working well here, and what 2 or 3 things need more attention? I mean, I have people, we have to actually expand the survey to allow more than 1,000 characters. Well, since you asked.
And the reason I ask is I'm looking for some sort of expertise to make sure this thing is relevant and valid. I mean, I don't want, you know, the first thing when I saw your comments about surveys, which is a great thing, by the way, part of strategic planning, is in the last 2 years, we have surveyed our stakeholders to death, literally. I'm not suggesting we don't do it because of that.
Oh, okay.
But people are probably just frankly tired of seeing them, and we're going to have to do a great job communicating why we're doing it, because the first reaction is, another one? Did you get the idea?
Can I give you a thought about framing that up? So for your parents, you know what? We've asked a lot of you, and you've been incredible. And we've given you, I don't know, 3 surveys, 2 whatever. We learned a lot from those things, but we're going to give you one more opportunity to influence planning if you want it. It'll have 2 questions. It'll take you. But I think you pat people on the back for giving you the data you've gotten to this point.
Yeah. No. And once again, it's an observation. I'm not suggesting that it's a reason not to do it.
Yeah.
And we have to figure out making sure that we get people to understand the difference so that they don't think we already did it.
Yeah.
Yes, and that they're doing the same thing over and over. I mean, I lost count. I didn't tell you what
No, they got one today.
Today, there was another one, yes. What is this one?
Sorry, I didn't even bring that up.
Yeah, there's a task force working on defining the values that they want the permanent director to have, and so the survey went out today to parents and
It's very
it's going to be
focused.
tomorrow to staff and students, but it's a very focused, targeted thing, and I think as long as we get a little distance between that one and this one, and then we thank them for all their input, you know.
Thanks for bringing it up. If you also, I believe you'll gain capital and direct and correctly so. If you come to a focus group or if you answer the survey, you're going to be providing us information to help us make the best possible hire we can. Because we now are hiring from this, we're not hiring we need to find somebody who can really help us do what we want to do because we're different than the other charters. So your participation in planning, whether it's survey only or focus group only, is going to help us with the hire. I think that makes people go, oh, well, maybe I could find my way to the survey and do it then.
Now, in your model, is the focus group, moderators, one of the board members, is that, or who?
So, in a perfect world, we would have, at every focus group, we'd have an administrator, probably a teacher. You could even have some of your older students you could use, because it's really just sort of facilitating and making it happen. I think that a board member ought to welcome the group. And this is the third of our fifth group, and I'm a board member. I just want to say we appreciate you making the time, and certainly appreciate you for helping facilitate. As a board member, I'm going to step away because I don't want anybody to think that I'm listening to what people are saying. We'll get the data, but trust these people to do the work. For a board member to sort of bless the group as they start, and that's a really good thing. Whether it's the board chair that does them all, or you guys split them up, to hear from that, I think makes people go, oh, okay.
So who's running the focus group?
Pardon me?
Who's running the focus group?
Well, I think it would probably be an administrator, probably a teacher, maybe another employee. They're facilitating most of those groups.
And I would like to ask Lisa Anderson's group of students that do action, social action kinds of things, if they would like to help focus groups, maybe a student at each one, and especially a student, maybe help one student.
You may also have alumni who would like to be involved. I guess another great representation of the program.
And this is something, running focus groups is something I was paid to do for the last 8 years, so it's not a problem for me to help and keep them.
Just a quick note on the surveys. Again, we set them up so they're totally anonymous. People want to identify who they are, that's their own issue, but we'll be able to bring you a summary of comments versus every comment. You know, if somebody goes to school, colors ought to be orange and green, that's not going to be a trend, you're just not going to see that. When 8 or 9 people say, here's something that needs work, that's what you're going to see. You're really going to get the big trends. If there's any, I did one recently where someone said, I think Mr. Anderson is looking down my blouse in 11th grade civics. I had to call a student and go, okay, I feel like a mandatory reporter, I don't know if this is true, but it's all over. But other than that, we really get a lot of people that say, and I also find in the surveys, nobody throws rocks. I mean, people will say, this thing isn't working very well, I don't think it's anybody's fault, but I'd like to see it fixed. Well, I can live with that kind of thing. What else can we talk about regarding the planning project that would help you with your expectations and make sure we get it done the way you want to get it done?
What's the timing overall, and how does it play out in your mind?
I believe that you gain political capital by saying, we're going to start this and we're going to get it done. So I would give you 30 to 45 days from the day the survey goes out to the day you're done.
So are we like November, December, something like that?
Your executive director will ask you for your preferences, and then she will deliver a schedule for your review and eventual approval. But you'll need 2 5-day weeks to have the surveys open. You'll probably need 2 or 3 weeks to have those focus groups, early parts of the week. You're not going to run Friday or Saturday or Sunday. To have those focus groups, and then we schedule one last meeting for all of you to look over the results. And Cecilia facilitates that, so you pick all the final products and benchmark them. It can be done in 30 days. If to stretch it out, it won't hurt you at all. But I think that when you say to the community, we've got a project, we'd like to see you involved, we're going to start it here, we're going to end it here, and people go, wow, you gave me a participation opportunity, and I did, and you guys finished up, and I can see the product, and I understand, I can see the threads from the survey summaries to what people said to what you did. I think you get a lot of credit.
The question was slightly loaded, and I apologize, but I feel we should do the process right.
Yeah.
We don't want to do this every year. We want to do it every 3 to 5 years, let's say. So if it takes a couple extra weeks, I'd rather them to do it right.
Yep.
And because there's also some considerations as everyone's anxious about if we're we're gonna change, tell me soon, we're making progress, we're making plans. But I would rather that we take the extra couple of weeks to get all the feedback that we need to do it right. So as long as we're in this kind of area of the next month or two-ish, I feel like that should be sufficient for us.
Yeah, Dan, I also want to make sure that you have it done so that you can use it to frame up that search for your executive director.
Yeah, but there's
Yeah,
another
and-
group
Thank
that's
you.
working on that search, and then they bring the recommendations to the board. Some people here are probably on that group, but there's a group led by a former board chair who's not on the board right now, a teacher, who brings information. She's got a timeline, and she's got task forces, and so that is a train that's moving along in parallel to this train. We can obviously inform it. I mean,
Is
they
that,
are-
is that train acting on specific board direction?
Yeah.
Yes. It is, and it's working off of the old mission and vision.
Yeah.
And so the concern is that if that changes too much, are we gonna be diverging unintentionally? And I think that's a valid concern, so we
It
just
is.
want to, yeah.
But Dan, I guarantee you that your successful candidate is going to be able to have and show successful experience doing these things. I mean, I'll just say it out loud. Well, I won't say it out loud. I will say though that this is the most important part of the interview process. He or she ought to be able to show tremendous value in getting these things done. I just did a search for an orthopedic group. And one of their big issues was building satellite clinics that positively cash flow. And so I sent out email questions to 6 potential finalists. And there were 10 questions, and each person had 24 hours to answer the questions. They got to pick their 24 hours in a 10-day window. One person sent theirs back, and the answer to question 1, tell us how you would successfully build satellite clinics that positively cash flowed within the first 6 months. The person on email said, I'm offended you would ask a question like this through the impersonal medium of email. I look forward to scheduling an interview with you at my earliest convenience. Anybody here married to in a relationship with an orthopedic surgeon? They're the most difficult medical professionals imaginable. And there are 21 of them that own this practice. And they looked at that and said, we don't need a 20-second jerk here. The person that actually now is the director said, I've never done that. But over the next 2 pages, I'm going to tell you how I would go about doing it. The first thing I did is I looked at the demographics around St. Cloud. And it seems to me that compared to your competition, you're missing opportunities in Alexandria and Wilmot. Looking those up and understanding their hospitals, I would suggest a plan would emerge like this based on what I read from AMA guidelines. So this person did 3 pages of research for one of the 10 questions and clearly indicated the ability to think hard, plan hard, and work very hard for the opportunity to earn an interview. So I'm suggesting that this is of interest, and I want the next person to be able to align his or her work with it. But if he or she can't add value from here down, we're going to hire him.
So that begs the question of kind of timing, because it seems like your position is, you put all this together and then hire the person to it. But let me suggest another way of doing it, which is, should not the new person be a part of this process? Because, I mean, how different is it? Because right now, I mean, Cecilia's interim. Now we're handing something to a new person. Are we gonna give a chance and have another session so that they can refine it? Or
Nope.
how does that all work? Because
So Jeff, here's the nightmare that happens all the time in pre-K-12 public education.
yeah,
Well, if you hire me, I got a kick-ass vision. I got a vision for how this place ought to
I'm
work.
not suggesting they
No, no.
work on the vision and mission.
No, but if you hire someone and they suggest to you that what you're doing is not going to work, they're the wrong person. It's like when you hire an accountant. What is 2 and 2 equal? Well, you're the business owner, whatever you want it to equal. 5. So you're fired. Oh, well, you might get hired. But we want somebody who comes in and says, My job's not to tell you what to do. You're the board. I get 49% of every vote, and you said, here's the plan, I'll make that happen.
Yeah.
They may come back with some suggestions about work plan iterations, but they never convince the board to set their work aside.
But that's what we did to hire our interim.
So what I did when I
I'm
was
just trying to
looking,
understand how
so
that
a
fits.
person will be looking on your website to see what your strategic plan is and see, am I a good fit for this place? I want to walk into a place that has a plan, so I don't need to do a strategic plan in my first year.
And does that plan excite me as a
Yes,
leader?
right.
Because if it doesn't, I'm not gonna apply.
Right.
One of the people that applied for this executive director for the orthopedic clinic, in the letter of application, I believe that my 17 years owning and running a machine tool and die shop uniquely qualifies me to be the, okay, well we're setting that, thank you, but we're setting that aside. We want people that have been there and done this stuff. I'll also give you another thought. I'd like you to hire by about February 1.
Yep, they're on track for that.
Okay, because great people that want to leave don't want to handicap their organizations by leaving in May.
And the other thing is, I want a good portion of the year with a plan so that I can show success, so that I'm working off of a plan, because our current strategic plan is expired. There's nothing wrong with it, but I'd like to be working off of a current plan for some of my tenure, too. So, but I think it would be unfortunate to delay, in my opinion.
And I'm not asking to leave necessarily. And by the way, I'm not disagreeing with you, but also it's not feeling just right now. There's something missing. I can't put my finger on it, and it's just not feeling just right.
Well, how many executive directors have you hired in your life? It's like this unusual act among consenting adults. It's pretty weird, and so it goes wrong because they're not like doing layups. If the coach has you do a couple thousand layups, you kind of groove it. Executive hiring is really slippery.
I will say.
Yeah, so what's I know it's slippery. That's
So
why we're trying to.
But again, rather than go and shop at the grocery store when you're hungry, you're going to go grocery shopping knowing exactly what's on your list, and you're going to be able to see whether people can deliver that. And if you send them those 8 or 9 questions in advance, I mean, I had one guy say he was going to be a superintendent in a big metro district. He said, I'm not going to have the ability to get to a computer over the next week. I said, wow, then I'm not sure the committee is going to be able to consider you a candidate. Where are you? I'm in Tampa. I said, they have computers in Tampa. He goes, yeah, but I don't want to use one. Huh. Okay, you just moved from the green pile of applicants into the yellow pile. I mean, and you're going to find people who really want this job who could do it. And you're also going to find people that are mavericks that want to run schools that they think have less rules and regs than pre-K-12. The people you're going to find in that pool, you're going to find a bunch of mavericks that, again, could muck up a 2-car parade. And you don't want them here.
Yeah, you're not quite getting my point. I'm not sure what point I'm trying to make, but it's not good.
Well, you're not sure about the reliability of the system we've discussed, and you will make it work by the time we get there.
Yeah, it's not just about reliability. I just want to make sure we cover it.
Okay.
We're just going to say, to move the discussion along, I feel like we will have another session where we will take all this hard data stuff in. We will do the priorities as a board.
Yep.
We will agree on the 4 to 5 priorities. And that timing sounds like it'll be in the October, November. I don't want to put it down so concretely, but it's going to be in the next month or 2.
Yes.
It sounds like.
Guaranteed.
So I feel like that's still consistent with our hiring of the full-time director and the needs for the expansion committee and the different things that we have. I mean, assuming these are still going to be priorities. And I think they will, but let's do that. So I feel like we will address some of the concerns in the future sessions.
Yeah, we might. That's just it. But I want to call attention to that, so that I have that.
And I was going to say too, just to make sure in terms of our structure as we're thinking about it, the mission and vision in that situation remains fairly static. So what they've done so far, we're not talking about making a major overhaul of either of these things. It's what do they mean and how do we adjust our core values to help reflect new situations. So those things are relatively static. What they've done so far remains. And that seeing the impact information from the values committee and those things we can help use that then to draft our priorities for the candidates. So then once they have that from the board, when we see that, we can give them that, and thus then when they're creating the questions, if I'm understanding it correctly, then the values, like the different subcommittees that are part of the process right now, their feedback from those will help us make the priorities and help the questions be drafted for the interviews. Am I understanding that correctly?
It's a beautiful parallel data set coming to you.
Yeah, yeah. All of that's all
Yeah, that's
stays
kind of
as important as it always was.
like the top
And
three are
the
still there, and then it's the information from the, like the middle-ish, the priorities one, that's where we use some of the committee work, because they're gonna have that information, and those survey informations will be really important.
Are there any other potential speed bumps or things that could use some discussion here regarding the planning steps, the activities?
I think changing anything in the mission or vision, core values, I think we can work with, but mission or vision, that's so ingrained, I think changing it, and it might seem like one word, but it can change a lot of meaning. If it's important enough to change one word in it, then it's a lot. So I think we need to kind of really, as a team, decide, are we gonna scrap a significant amount of work because we feel strongly enough to change the mission or vision, or are we okay leaving it and knowing the other things adjust and the language is open-ended enough? Obviously, you know they can't put that in. But I think that needs to be established because it's been back and forth, and there's been, I need to know.
I like what I heard where the board still has the decision, we're getting input from others. So I think, I guess from my perspective, it would be nice to hear 95% of the people are saying vision and mission is spot on, please don't change a thing. That would help inform me to say it sounds like we're moving in the right direction. If I have 95% of the people saying something is off here, we're still going to school despite the fact that this is not right, I would like to know that too. So,
but do you mean the mission and vision, or do you mean like the actual strategic plan? That's what I'm saying, like the questions I think are more geared towards strategic plan versus the mission and vision.
The questions,
Survey questions?
Yeah.
They're pretty open.
I'll suggest you start with what 2 or 3 things are going well and what 2 or 3 things need more attention. We can add more questions to that. You know, as specific, are there any peculiar, anything you want the executive director to be able to, we can add and adjust, but you start with those 2 because they're open-ended, and that's when people just pour data.
And that, to me, kind of goes with what Michelle is saying. Those comments are going to mostly inform priorities, and maybe we can make some interpretations that go back to that core value list too. But unless we're going to be really surprised by the feedback, it's probably not going to tell us our vision and mission is wrong. I think that's what we're saying.
yeah, I would be surprised
Yeah.
if our mission and vision is significantly wrong. Because we're all here probably because of those words. But I also feel like if we believe in it, we should be willing to have a challenge as well. So then it should stand. And then we can say, okay, we're still on the right path.
So I know it's past 8 and we promise not to keep you past 8, so don't promise a little bit. But I want to say that, you know, I can be in touch with Bruce, and I don't know what the next steps are, but you guys can let me know what comes up for you to come today. And Bruce, you have a thing for us to fill out, right?
The very last page in the agenda packet is an evaluation. And if you would fill them out and leave them on the table, I'll type these all up and you kind of get a view of everybody's thoughts about what worked, where the big discoveries were, any improvements. But if you would also leave them on the table, we can I'm going to pass it to Celia and Dan in that order for our closure comments.
Yeah, I'll wait till people stop writing. Should we close our comments?
Yeah, sure.
You want me to say something to you, or?
No, I would just maybe to the community, for those watching in, thanks for tuning in, and Bruce, thanks so much for your time tonight. I feel like it's nice to have some external perspective, right? I mean, because we can probably spin our wheels a little bit going around and off, so it's nice to have, and I appreciate your experience coming in with some of the different anecdotes from others. Maybe I'm filling out my questionnaire here too, but I appreciated the open and honesty that you kind of encouraged us to have as a board, and as well as the administration, in sharing compliments towards each other and also things that we can do better. I felt like that wasn't antagonistic in any way. We carried on quite well. So I guess I would just say I'm looking forward to seeing what we end up with here. And thanks for your help.
Just two quick observations. There was not a single yeah but here, and boards that have simmering or festering conflict do a yeah but. Well, I know what you said, but we didn't do it that way in the past, or I'm going to have a hard time explaining that. There were no yeah buts, there were no qualified praises given. Second, for a group that's been through some pretty difficult times, now nobody felt the need to go back and say, and by the way, last October, I'm still a little pissed off that you know what I mean? And I deal with boards where those things just are so close to the surface, they bring up. You're all really focused on the future and getting this thing done right, the plan and your search. That's great. Congratulations on being part of a healthy group.
And I know you're trying to write, but I have to stand up. I do want to thank you all for being willing to do something different. I went out on a limb by asking us to work with a different consultant. I went out on a limb by saying, let's go off-site and try something new, and I'm just grateful that you were open to trying it, and I'm really hopeful that you'll trust that we can work together on this process and keep it minimal work for you too, and it'll give us a good product.
You're on the way. What do we need to do to clean up in here? What do we need to do to satisfy the contract that was signed to you?
The only thing would be maybe that these 3 tables and that table need to be folded up.
Get knocked down? Okay.
Yep, and pack up the tech equipment.
Okay.
But I can say, so anyone who needs to get home to pets or families, please do.
And this is the schools?
Yep.
Okay, let me get this off here.
Lots of questions.
You can sign up for those on YouTube, so thanks for watching.
You guys can put your